On this episode, I want to share with you an interview I did with Iowa State Senator Sandy Salmon. We talk about what's going on in Iowa, in the U.S., and around the world. There are some crazy things happening. The threat of U.S. sovereignty given up to the WHO. We talk about human rights that are under attack. We talk about mandates for health travel certificates. We also talk about some of the Iowa legislative priorities: protecting religious freedom, prohibiting counseling censorship, that's getting into the transgender agenda, restricting access to pornography for minors. You'll hear how the plans for today's corporate ESG scores are just like China's social credit system. These should be non-controversial things. We need to stand for the truth. This really shows how much the church needs to be speaking up today. This interview was during an opportunity when I guest hosted the Tamara Scott Show. I think you're really going to enjoy this, so make sure you stick around until the end. Do you believe the United States should maintain its sovereignty, or do you think that we should be subject to the dictates of an international organization like the WHO? Well, we're going to talk about that and a lot more on this episode. Welcome to the Tamara Scott Show. I'm Ryan Howard, in for Tamara today. And we've got a very special guest today, Sandy Salmon. She's a Iowa State Senator, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff going on in Iowa that also affects the rest of the U.S. and actually some global conversations that are happening as well. And we've got a little time before our guest joins us, and so I'm going to go over a few of those items and give a little bit of background on some of these things so that we can be set up for a great conversation. And Senator Salmon is going to give us an overview of the latest and greatest of what's going on in Iowa and, like I said, in the U.S. as well. And she's going to talk about some of her priorities. And we got a lot to get into, and so we'll see what all we have time for. But I think you're really going to enjoy this show. It's going to be a high impact, and you're going to leave with some actions that you can take as well to make sure we are defending freedom and standing up for truth here in Iowa and throughout the U.S. as well, and wherever you might be joining from. Now, before we get much further, I want to say a special thank you to our sponsors. And the first is MyPillow. And we can go to, we have promo code Tamara at mypillow.com and My Store and My Coffee. And you can get all the products there. And when you support MyPillow using promo code Tamara, Tamara, you can save up to 80% on great products that bless you, bless your home, and bless your family. Now, you can also help share truth across the globe by joining that as well and by using that promo code Tamara. Now, the Tamara Scott Show works hard to bring you great guests and present truth in ways that you may not otherwise hear. It's an honor to have you use promo code Tamara. Now, next up, our sponsor is Bella Grace Elixir. Bella Grace Elixir offers 3 key ingredients to help you bring health from the inside out. In 2022, Bella Grace won an award for helping with cognitive function, and in 2023, Bella Grace Elixir was awarded with a Startup Star in Athletics for outstanding new ingredients, formats, and benefits shaping the sports and active nutrition industry. It is a product for both men and women. Now, you can use the QR code if you see that up on the screen to save 10%, or you can also go to tamara.bellagraceglobal.com and you can get that discount there as well. And all you have to do is cover the cost of shipping. Now, if you're interested in being an ambassador for the brand, you can email the Tamara Scott Show at gmail.com to learn more. All right. Thank you for that. Now, we thank you again to our sponsors. Now, I want to get into a key topic. Now, if you don't subscribe to Senator Sandy Salmon's newsletter, I want to encourage you to do that. And we're going to talk to you about how you can do that here a little bit later. But there's a lot of information that she gives in that newsletter that gives you a lot of background and a lot of understanding on what's really going on, the real conversations happening today. And that's both, that's at the state level, that's at the national level, and the international level. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, first off here, is how our national sovereignty is at stake. I think we saw during COVID very clearly that our elites don't like that we have personal freedoms, and they really did a lot to attack those and come after those. And they really pushed the bounds, both at a national level and some of the different states, to see how far they could push it and how much freedom they could take. And we saw churches being shut down, and we saw really all assemblies being shut down, and some of the more ridiculous assemblies being allowed, and different liquor shops and marijuana shops open, but churches not opened. And they allowed the streets to be filled with rioting and those sorts of things, but then they closed down singing in different churches. And so fortunately, there were some lawsuits that were brought by churches that did not comply and those were in California, the Jack Hibbs Church and Cheon, and I think a few others as well. John MacArthur might have been involved in that, and that went up to the Supreme Court, and they actually won. They was constitutional, defending the rights to assemble and the rights to freedom of religion and to peaceably assemble and all those things go with it. And so, praise God for that. We have men and women actually standing up for the reality of the rights that God granted to us. The government does not grant us our rights. Government is to defend our rights. It's not there. They don't come from the government. The rights come from God, our creator, and it's the government's job to protect those. So I want to talk about our national sovereignty that is at stake with some of the amendments that have been proposed to the World Health Organization, the WHO, which is the healthcare policy arm of the United Nations. Now, these were proposed by the Biden administration, and this came up in around early to mid 2023, and I believe my understanding is it got pushed out to this year. So in the next assembly, they're trying to get these international health regulations passed, and that would be in the late May, early June timeframe of 2024. And there's a lot of concern raised throughout the U.S. because of what's going on here. We have national sovereignty areas at risk, like healthcare, travel, economic control. And if these amendments that I'm going to talk about are adopted, it usurps the constitutional authority in this nation and becomes the supreme law of the land. And it's just absolutely absurd that we're even talking about this, but we need to because it's the reality of what they're trying to do. Now, first, what would these amendments do? First, it would change the WHO, the World Health Organization, from simply an advisory body that just makes recommendations to a legally binding authority. Now, that's in Articles 1 and 42 of those amendments. Second, it would assert the authority of the WHO over anything that has the potential to impact public health. Well, that is far reaching. I mean, it's just insane to think about that. That's from Article 2. Number 3 is it removes the requirement to, quote, respect dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of people. That you heard that right. Respect dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of people. It removes that requirement. Well, isn't that just the dream of the tyrant? That is the tyrannical dream of the left. And to not be bogged down by these things we call freedoms and rights, well, that's not acceptable. I think it goes without saying. But, this is all happening while we're sleeping. It's all happening just under the table. It's just kind of being snuck in. And this really is a treaty. This is something that should take an act of Congress to be involved in. But here we go. They're just pushing these things through. And a lot of the amendments that the Biden administration have done or wanted to do are given to smaller nations so that they don't come from the U.S., but they're actually written by the Biden regime, by our current leadership. And so this is just unacceptable. Now, number 4, it gives control to the WHO over an, quote, allocation plan for health products. And that requires states to supply health products as directed. And that's Article 13A. So that means where we have the masks and different all health products. I mean, those are just things that they're going to have allocation. So instead of us knowing what capacity we need for these different things, well, then they get allocated. And so that means they have control. Now, that brings up a whole nother topic of what we consider health products today and whether or not we should actually be using those. There's lots of medications and prescriptions and different things that are the solution, which really just band-aid things and address symptoms rather than get to the root cause. But that's a topic for another episode. Now, number 5, it gives the WHO authority to mandate medical treatments. That's right, mandate medical treatments, and that includes examinations, treatments, medications, proof of prophylaxis, proof of vaccine, and implementing contact tracing. That's Article 18. Look at this. I mean, this is like I said, the dream of the tyrannical government. This is the dream. This is exactly what they want. And this is what they're attempting to do. And we cannot allow this to happen. Mandating medical treatments. It's just absurd. Now, that reminds me of what's happening in places like California today, where they actually are taking the rights of parents away. And they're basically mandating that parents do whatever the child wants. a child that doesn't comprehend, a child that can't comprehend the idea of losing sexual function, and this is in the transgender space where they mandate that the parents give in to these treatments, and it's actually classifying parents who don't affirm their children as child abuse or dereliction of parental duties, which is just absurd, and it's basically a state-sanctioned kidnapping. And now they're trying to do that across state lines as well. Number 6, it gives the WHO authority to issue global health certificates. That could be digital or paper, and that's for tests, for vaccines, for treatments, for recovery, for tracing, and for travelers' health declarations. This is all over these amendments. Articles 18, 23, 24, 27, 28, 31, 35, 36, and 44. That's a deep one. There's a lot going on with that one. We absolutely need to not have that. Number 7 is that it would empower the emergency committee to override decisions of sovereign nations regarding health measures. So what measures should we be taking? What measures should we be taking? Well, we need to do what fits for where we live. And so what they would be doing is dictating and taking over. And so that's not going to work. We know we want local control. That's what we want. That's a principle of governance that we should abide by, is to have local control. We don't need some person, some king or some whatever, sovereign, whatever, over in another country or even in another state telling us what we need to be doing locally. And that goes for education, that goes for healthcare, that goes for absolutely every aspect of society, that we need to have local control. That's what we need, not global control or national control. Now, when it comes to rights and those sorts of things, protection of rights, now I mean real rights like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to bear arms. Those are things that we do need national protections over, but it doesn't stop there. We also have local protections, and we're seeing lots of attempts throughout the U.S. to usurp those rights. And we see them coming from the bottom and also from globally at the WHO and the United Nations as well, like we're talking about here. Now, number 8, it would require increased funding from America and other nations. Increased funding. America is a major funder of the WHO, and Trump actually started activities to get us out from doing that. But unfortunately, it's gone the other direction under the Biden regime, and that's requiring that funding would be Article 44A. Number 9, it would empower the WHO to censor disinformation and misinformation at its own discretion. That's from Annex 1. Now, you might ask, well, how do we know what is misinformation? How do we know what is disinformation? Well, that's whatever they deem as misinformation and disinformation. But how is that determined today? Well, it's basically comes down to, does it support the agenda that they want? Does it support what they want to do? That's really what it comes down to. Or are you going the other direction? We see that censorship coming, and we see social media, many places, many of these different social media platforms having partnered with the government to basically act as an extension of the government, which then makes them a government agent, which puts them under, they need to operate as the government agent. So that means they can't be restricting free speech. And so we have these disinformation boards even happening at a national level, at the federal level here in the US, that they're trying to put together. All of this stuff is happening, and the majority uninformed electorate is not aware of any of this. But we need to be aware. This stuff all relies on an uninformed electorate. That's why they want to have, okay, term limits and convention of states and all these sorts of things, because we think that they say that the Constitution is the problem. But the Constitution is not the problem. They're not even following the Constitution the way it's written today. And so the problem is an uninformed electorate. When I ran for office, I ran for the Iowa House of Representatives in 2020, and I found out that there's an assumption there in a campaign that only about 10% of an electorate is actually informed, is actually considered highly informed. 10%. I mean, that is just an insanely low number, and that needs to change. I think it's changing now. We have many people waking up saying, wow, okay, we want to keep our freedoms. We want to keep doing these things that we are doing and not lose these freedoms. But hey, we got to be more awake. We got to stay awake, and we need to have this going far and wide. We need to be bringing more people into this. You need to share this with others so that they can be informed as well. Now, number 10, it would create an obligation by the nations to construct and maintain WHO infrastructure at all ports of entry. That's Annex 10 from these amendments. So, have you traveled internationally? Have you traveled through an airport? Have you gone through a checkpoint? Well, we saw after 9/11, a lot of those requirements changed, a lot more restrictions and a lot more invasive activities that they're doing. But how would you like to have a WHO activities at the ports of entry in the United States? I can't even imagine. It's just absolutely insane. And so, of course, this is just really setting it up. I mean, we've got the social credit score in China, and for whatever reason, they can just say, okay, well, this person is not going to get a loan, or this person's kids can't go to this school, or whatever it might be. And it's some random thing that they won't disclose, but it's because their social credit score issue. And of course, that is where this is going, where it's just they break it down. They have internet searches, internet search history that they're using in China against people, where they found that people who did internet searches like 3 years ago, and they would be persecuting them for those. So say, for example, they were searching about the Bible online or looking for a church online. Well, then they come and they harass and persecute them for that, based on that. And there's evidence from that. I've done interviews with some of these different organizations that show that help persecuted Christians around the world, and they provide the evidence of that. So clearly, all of these, I just went through 10 of these, and there's no doubt that these severely erode our national sovereignty. And if you search for it, of course, you'll find articles written that try to say, no, 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 that's not what's happening. But it's pretty clear reading through these that is exactly what's happening. It's exactly what they want to do. And we need to keep the Constitution as the supreme law of our land. The Constitution is not broken. We have transitioned to an administrative state rather than a state bound by the Constitution and laws. And so we need to go back to that. We need to abide by the Constitution the way it was written and the amendments therein. So we have also the WHO. Their leadership is very influenced by the Chinese Communist Party, by the CCP. And they won't even allow credible comprehensive international investigation into the origins of COVID. And so no surprise there. So fortunately, we have Iowa Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst, who have signed on to legislation, and along with others, that basically just says Senate approval is required before these amendments can take force and have the force of law in the United States before they can be implemented. So a call to action for you is to agree with all of this, to understand that we need to keep our sovereignty, agree with that we need to keep our sovereignty, and agree that we should not be giving it up to the WHO. And so here's one. One, we should call on Congress. We should contact our congressmen and women and ask them to, one, stop funding the WHO. The United States is the biggest contributor to the WHO. I mean, can you believe that? Yeah, we'll just give you the money and then you tell us what to do. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. Second, we want to withdraw from the WHO, completely withdraw. And I mentioned earlier that Trump began the withdrawal process, but Biden has reversed that. And third, we want to require ratification of this treaty by Senate if we don't leave the WHO. And that's exactly what it is. They're trying to position it as though it's not a treaty, but it absolutely 100% is a treaty. And so that should require the congressional approval by the Senate. So we cannot stand for this. We cannot allow this. I want to encourage you again, those three things were contact your legislator, and we want to stop funding the WHO. We want to withdraw from the WHO, and we want to require ratification of this treaty by the Senate if we don't leave the WHO. So those are the three things that we want to do. I hope you will reach out to your Senate today, your Senate leaders, whatever state you might be watching from. So there's a lot more to unpack here, and while we wait for our guests to join us. And another topic that I want to talk about is ESG, environmental social governance. I wonder how much you've heard about this. And I'm sure that you've seen at least something about this. But this is where we have environmental social governance. So we have these places, these investment firms like BlackRock and State Street, that are and Vanguard, that are pushing companies to talk about like CO2 emissions and this racial equity and diversity and inclusion and all these sorts of things that by themselves have a normal definition of what we would be interested in having. But when you put them together, it becomes something that can be used like cultural Marxism, like where you have just either every person is either an oppressor or they're oppressed, and the goal is division. That's what Marxism is. And it's using ESG is using environmental social governance, is using this idea to get into to control of the corporations and also individuals within the corporations. And so we have from Senator Sandy Salmon that we'll talk to here shortly. But I'm going to read something from one of her newsletters that she sent out, and this is really where ESG is really like a social credit score, like China does for an individual. It's really that for a company, and it's a way to maintain control if they want funding. And like you'll hear companies say things like, "Well, our stakeholders," and you'll notice they switched from shareholders to stakeholders. That's a little play that they've done recently, which actually changes it to say, okay, well, the environment and all these sorts of things are shareholder or stakeholders, but they'll say our stakeholders are asking about this. But really, it's Vanguard, it's BlackRock, and State Street. These three are asking about these things, and then they have to put all these policies in. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I think we'll wrap up with that back to ESG. But I want to welcome our guest, Sandy Salmon. I'm told she's on the line now, and so we'll go ahead and bring her on. She is the Iowa State Senator for District 29 in Iowa. So, hey, Sandy, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, well, it's been a while since we've got to talk, and so it's great timing for us to get an update from you on what's going on in Iowa today in the U.S. And I gave some background before you came on, talking about what's going on at the WHO and how our national sovereignty is at risk. And one of your newsletters you had last year, you had gone through 10 points of the amendments of what they were trying to do and ratify to take sovereignty away. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of start off and have you give us kind of a lay of the land of what's going on in Iowa and some of the things that you're working on.
Well, just for an overview, the budget is one of the biggest things we do. So we're going to work to make the budget stable and predictable and sustainable, keeping spending under control, just like you have to do in your households. Income taxes this year, we are looking to accelerate the flat tax reduction. We put a bill in last year to reduce the tax rate to help make Iowa more competitive, to put more money in people's pockets, to just spur our economy. And now it appears that we will may be able to accelerate those tax cuts. So that we're looking at that. On property taxes, there's quite a bit of angst about property taxes here because Iowa's about 40th out of 50 states on property taxes. They're one of the most unfair taxes in my view because they can still go up, but your income may stay the same or even drop. So that is something we'll continue to work on. It's a multi-year effort. We are looking at an education bill for adopting curriculum that follows a body of research that says that teaching phonics is the best way to teach reading. That's basically relying on the science of reading. And this is something that is of no surprise to probably many of your listeners that have known for a long time that phonics is the best method. Well, now um, government's finally catching up with that. And so we are looking at a bill to require any curriculum or programs that adopted have to use the phonics method. We are also looking at a Religious Freedom Restoration Act that would basically require that in religious liberty cases, that the highest standard be used by the courts to determine the outcome of those religious freedom cases. Right now, it's not clear in Iowa law, but we want the courts to use the same standard that's used for all other fundamental rights. And that bill we passed out of subcommittee yesterday, and is up for consideration today. And there's quite a rally against that bill going on now down in the Capitol. But our plan is to pass that out this afternoon. Also, we'll be looking at dealing with the pornography issue. As your listeners probably know, pornography destroys children, marriages, and families virtually unhindered now on the internet. Nearly 100% of 18-year-old males have been exposed to pornography at this current time. So that is total saturation. It's totally unacceptable. There's several bills coming forward to help deal with this. One is an age verification requirement for someone to enter a pornography website. That's just a no-brainer. Other states have done this, and it's gaining in popularity. So we're hoping to move that forward. It's also a governor's priority. So we're pretty optimistic about that. Another bill is requiring the pornography filtering software, which is on every internet capable device like iPhones, tablets, and iPads, things like that, requiring them to be turned on, requiring the filtering device to be turned on, so that the default mode on that internet device is to protect kids instead of enabling predators. And I'm hopeful that will get traction as well. And we've also brought forward a bill dealing with eminent domain to put greater protections for Iowa farmers and landowners that are concerned about the possibility of private companies using eminent domain to seize farmland in the form of easements for a taxpayer-funded private project, a carbon dioxide pipeline that really has no public use, has health and safety risks, and is basically based on debatable climate change ideas. We are hoping that this gets taken up, but it will be an uphill battle because Senate leaders have indicated they do not want to take it up. But I think it's the right thing to do. Like, our Constitution says that private property cannot be taken but for public use, and this is not a public use. So we're concerned that it will be approved by the Iowa Utilities Board. So we're trying to put more protections in there for landowners. There's also bills coming forward on election integrity to help clean up the voter rolls, to require a verification of U.S. citizenship to register to vote, and to allow cities and counties larger than 3,500 population to opt out of counting by voting machines. And as you know, voting machines, or your listeners know, they're very vulnerable to hacking. Both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, have said that. Numerous studies have come out and attested to that. So we really need a a major paradigm shift to going back to hand counting instead of machine counting. Um, we also have a bill um, prohibiting local governments, cities, and counties from censoring counseling by social workers or mental health counselors or behavioral health therapists, uh, because we've had in our area here in Iowa, our local city has restricted counselors from helping their clients that want to change their sexual orientation or live according to their biological sex. So it's a case where the government is suppressing certain viewpoints, certain client directed goals from happening in the privacy of a counseling office. And so this is a violation on many fronts: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, violation of equal protection, of violating the standards and protocols used by counselors in their practice, which is um, to help the client achieve their own goals. We're also, I'm also putting forward a bill to provide protection in public restrooms. Last year in Iowa, the we provided those protections in schools that a person had to use the restroom of their biological sex. And so we're wanting to extend that um, to the public accommodations, to the wider public. Um, we also have a bill to add parent-driven civil enforcement and other penalties to Iowa's law that already prohibits the teaching of critical race theory in schools, because a number of parents have told us that um, schools are often continuing that programming of for students in spite of the law.
It looks like we might have a connection issue there. While we get her back up, if you can hear, there's a lot going on, and all of these are very highly charged topics. I mean, these are not insignificant things. These are freedom things. These are rights things. These are things that the left has been secretly getting after. And I talk about how, the church wasn't necessarily pushed out of culture. I think the church evacuated the culture, and the left has been able to take over instead of us sort of coaching culture along with the way it should be going. So Sandy, did you make it back on?
I am back on now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, great. Good. Okay, so did you finish everything you wanted to share from your
Okay.
overview, or was there more you wanted to add?
Just one more thing was we are putting forward a bill to require an opt-in for sex education class instead of the current system, which is opt-out. Parents would have to opt their child out, but an opt-in helps ensure that parents can view the material for the course um, before they allow their child to take part in it. So
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
that's kind of the things I'm working on.
that's a lot. And I know there was another one you had mentioned, or that I saw in one of your newsletters, about a governor, what the governor can do during disaster emergency. There's a disaster emergency reform, perhaps adjusting some of the capabilities of the governor
Yeah.
during that. But there's wow. I mean, it's not that it's overwhelming. It's just that there are so many important things going on, and it's hard to keep up with it all. I don't know how you do it, but fortunately, we have, thank God we have people like you in our legislature that are fighting for these things, because these are all very important and very consequential. I mean, they're critical things, and so, I mean, and some of them are no-brainers too, like you say. I mean, like the pornography one, with the filter and the eminent domain. Really, all of them are no-brainers to me, really. But and I think our viewers would agree. Now, Are there any that well, actually, there's one other update that I wanted to give. If you could share, and I think probably there's some background understanding from our viewers on the whole pro-life abortion topic in Iowa. There was a heartbeat bill that was passed, and then it got stuck in the courts, and then there was another bill that was the same bill that was passed. And could you give us just a 30,000-foot view of what's going on with that, and what we expect coming here in the next couple months?
Yes, we passed a heartbeat bill in a special session last summer. Um, and it was challenged. And so now it's in the courts, and we expect a decision on that bill probably in June sometime, or sometime during the spring. We'll expect to find out what the court would say about that. Hopefully that they uphold the constitutionality of it, especially in light of the Dobbs decision, which, as you know, it sent the abortion law back to the states.
They didn't know if that the state legislature would pass the same bill today, but you showed that we did, and so it'll be. I mean, it really shouldn't have been tied up in the courts in the first place, but that's where we landed. So I guess we continue along with that direction. But like you said, hopefully it will go through and actually be enacted, and like you said, it will save the majority of these lives, of these
Yeah.
unborn babies that deserve to live, and that their lives have value.
Yeah, we're kind of holding off on any uh, bringing forward any other legislation till we see how the court rules, because a lot of times we have to craft our legislation according to how the court rules, because we want it to be upheld. So everyone's looking towards this spring when we hear from the court.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And it's too bad that we have to sort of play the game with the courts that way, because they don't always rule the way that really makes sense to us who are constitutionalists. And so we do, but like you said, we got to play to where we'll have it go through and have it be upheld. And so we're thankful that we have people in our legislature in Iowa fighting for this and continuing that direction. Now, I wanted to dive a little more into this eminent domain. I mean, I think we can unpack that a little bit, because it's
Yeah.
the idea that, for people, for land to be taken. And I've heard just some incredible stories, just horrible stories of what people have experienced with this. And it's literally the government taking land to benefit private companies and individuals. And it makes no sense. But when I first heard about this, I thought it was like a Babylon Bee, as like a satirical thing where they said, oh, well, they're going to take the CO2, and they're going to liquefy it and put it in the ground and send it over here until they find out what to do with it. That's just for climate change. And I thought, I kind of chuckled a little, but I no, that's actually what they're doing, and it's incredibly dangerous, very flammable, and I think prone to explosions, and it's just very dangerous. So, I mean, is there any more detail you can give as far as kind of where this is at or what these interests are? I mean, there's people involved that, I mean, everybody can smell this miles away. I mean, is there any more detail that you can give to what's going on
Yeah.
here?
Well, there has been different things happen in Iowa. We've seen there were 3 carbon dioxide companies, and like Ryan said, what their plan is to liquefy the carbon dioxide coming off of ethanol plants, pipe it up to North Dakota, and store it underground. That's what it's for. And they're willing to upend um, hundreds of landowners' rights just to liquefy this substance and put it underground. And that makes no sense to anybody. We're not talking about.
Okay, looks like we lost Sandy again, but she'll be back shortly, I assume. And so, yeah, I mean, like she was saying, this is something that is literally, it's just benefiting these companies, and it's so clear to see that, okay, we're going to take the CO2 off of these plants and we're going to send it underground and send it up here, and there's going to be another use for it, this pure CO2 liquefied, and to be able to sell that, or to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do with it, or transform it or whatever. And it's just very clear how this is the case. And so I think, Sandy, we got you back on here. I was just starting to continue with some thoughts on what you were saying there.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now, the way it stands in Iowa, there are 3 companies that were involved, and Wolf Carbon is one of them. They have run into all kinds of problems in Illinois, so they're kind of falling off the picture. Navigator Project has pulled out and said they were not going to go through with the project because there was so much pushback. So that just leaves one company, Summit Carbon, and they are pushing through. And my understanding, just in the last couple.
Looks like we may have lost her again. We're struggling through some connection issues, so I appreciate your patience working through this, and we'll get her back up here as soon as we can. But, this is a critical issue. I think there's no question about it. We've got special interests, and I think that those of us who follow politics are no stranger to that. We understand that if something doesn't make sense, it doesn't really seem logical, you can think special interests. And that seems to be exactly what's happening here. And like she said, there was 3 companies involved, and now it's down to 1, Summit Carbon. And I think if we look at the ownership of that company and we look at others who are involved in it and those interests there, it becomes very clear to see that, well, we have special interests at play. And so there's also some big assumptions in this that it even makes sense to do in the first place, let alone the fact that it's private profit, using eminent domain for private profit. But what we have, though, is an assumption about CO2 being bad. And what that means is that they're leveraging that and saying that's part of the public good because they say we don't want that. But actually, there's not even science that supports that. And so I think, Sandy, we got you back on here.
Okay. Well, I just want your listeners to get to a picture of what we're talking about here. We're talking about not just 5 or 10 landowners that are being threatened. Summit is prepared to invoke eminent domain against over 400 landowners in the state of Iowa, about 1/4 to 1/3 of their entire route across the state. They're prepared to exercise eminent domain against those landowners. To me, it's just totally unacceptable. It's just brazen. It's just outrageous. And it shouldn't be happening. I've never seen it in my lifetime, this kind of private property grab. But a company that would do that is not a good corporate citizen. And I'm doing.
Looks like we lost her again, but we know we're thankful to have legislators like Senator Sandy Salmon fighting for this issue. I'm glad that we're able to keep getting her back on here to try and get this out, but I think you get the picture that this is a very big deal, this eminent domain. And so we need to be fighting against it. We need to be letting our Senate leadership know that we do not want this. If you're in Iowa, contact the Senate leadership and let them know that they need to be standing against this and taking up this issue. Sandy, I know you only got a few minutes left here. I know we're having some connection issues, but was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I guess what also hasn't been said, there's a lot of money involved, and a lot of people, everyday people, are disappointed that leaders aren't taking this up, and they really need to. Our job is to uphold the oath to the Constitution that we swore when we were elected to office. And the way I see it, I don't believe that many are doing that. And that's our job. That's our main job as legislators, is to protect people's rights. And We got more work to do.
Well said. Well, in our closing couple of minutes here, I want to just ask another detail about the election integrity. So in Iowa, I mean, we had the caucus recently, and within about 30 minutes, we had results, hand counted and handwritten ballots. And so we had to show IDs to do that. And that was, of course, in the Republican caucus. But what could you give a little more detail on? Is it just the voter rolls that need cleaned up in Iowa? It's the voter rolls and the machines, right? And is that the summary of it, or is there anything else that really needs to be addressed in Iowa?
Well, those are some loopholes. We have had citizens that have gone in and cleaned up the voter rolls on their own time, on their own dime. They're using their own resources, and they have found thousands of names on our voter rolls that either moved out of state or else have died, and that shouldn't be. And so we're coming forward with some legislation to make sure that we have this cleaned up. I know there's commercial companies out there that do a good job of protecting their clients' dollars. Commercial credit companies, they protect their clients' dollars. They make sure they know they can find that person and they know where they're at and they know how to get a hold of them so that they can protect their bottom line. And I would say our votes are just as important as those companies' dollars. And so we're going to utilize their technology and resources to help us clean up our voter rolls and just get them the way they're supposed to be. Because once you get the names off that are no longer eligible because they've moved or died, then you have more of a clean voter roll. You have less chance of fraud happening in your elections. So that's really important. I think that's something that's going to go in the Senate this year, and so I'm optimistic about that. So um, I
Great.
have several other bills. I'm not sure, if they're going to go, but we will work at it and keep, educating legislators and talking to them about the dangers of the voting machines. And we got a big mind shift to move with something like that, because most people that are voting now only remember voting by voting machine and having the machine count the votes.
Wow. Well, and that definitely needs to change. And looks like we might have lost Sandy. I'm not sure if we're going to get her back here. I know she's got to run to another meeting, but we actually, I mentioned that you should sign up for her newsletter, and I want to highly encourage you to do that. And you can go to sandysalmon.org to do that. And it will be educational for you, and it will also let you know what's going on. And like I said, it ties into some of the national conversations that we're having, as well as some of the international conversations. Sandy, I think looks like you're back on here. I know you got to run to go to some other meetings, and so
I
I want to give you
do.
a final word on how people can connect with you and get signed up for your newsletter. I think I gave them your website, but any other final thoughts you want to share, and then how can people connect with you?
Well, yes, at my website, sandysalmon.org, we need more and more people to get involved and stand up for our rights. Um, So if you're learning and you keep learning, educating yourself, and um, vote for the people that are going to stand up for your constitutional rights. I can't stress that enough. We need more of those people in the legislature. So thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate this chance to visit with your listeners, and I encourage them to contact me, and I'd be happy to visit with them.
All right. Well,
So
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sandy Salmon. It's really been a pleasure to have you on. And thank you for battling through some of the connection issues. And thank you for joining us. And I look forward to talking soon. Well, there you have it. I mean, we covered a lot. I mean, geez, we talked about taxes. We talked about education reform. We talked about religious freedom. We talked about restricting access to pornography. We talked about eminent domain being used for private gain. We talked about election integrity. We talked about the attempt to control what counselors can say, and that's really talking a lot about what's happened even in Waterloo, Iowa, where was originally from. I live in a town next to Waterloo now, Cedar Falls, but trying to restrict conversion therapy, which then they removed it and went backwards. And so very questionable actions from some of these local governments, but these are things that more and more people are getting informed on, and that includes you, of course. And so I want to invite you, like I said, to go to check out Sandy Salmon's website, get signed up for her newsletter, get in touch with her for any other information that you want to have there. Now, we didn't get to talk too much about the ESG, but you got a little flavor of it. And so I just want to read a statement here from one of Sandy's newsletters, some good information that I want to make sure we get to. So it says, large corporate directors and business investors with input from the federal government designate these ESG scores based on how well the person or small business or company adheres to a number of policies such as, quote, green, climate change inspired policies, opposition to the use of fossil fuels, opposition to production agriculture, opposition to gun manufacturing, beliefs about racial equity, including anti-racism, white privilege, etc., support for abortion on demand, and LGBT ideology. It has started to become a trend in some places to deny loans or investment capital if a company's ESG score is not high enough, meaning that the company does not adhere strongly enough to these policies. So these policies that have absolutely nothing to do with business performance, absolutely nothing at all. And so this bill, basically the bill they're talking about, would prohibit these ESG scores from being used in decisions regarding investments of our public funds, such as IPERs. And in addition, financial institutions and their customers need protection from ESG scores from being imposed on them. So where is this going? This is going down to the individual level. Right now, it's just companies, but where is it going? It's getting to where the individuals in this country, they already have the data. They already have this so-called carbon footprint to help understand where they can do more restrictions based on, okay, this person drove too much, they traveled too much, this and that, so now they're restricted, or now they can't buy, or they saw where they made this purchase at, and so now they can't, they bought a gun over there, or they bought something at this shop, and so now they're going to track that. And we saw our leadership trying to restrict or flag at institutions purchases from Bass Pro Shop or purchases from gun manufacturers or gun sales companies. And so we need to be awake. We need to be paying attention to all of this. And this is what's coming. It has been a pleasure to be on here with you. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to ryanshoward.com. I'm the host of Cutting Edge Faith. It's a podcast where we help you understand the times, embolden you to stand for truth, and also help you grow in your faith as well. And we need more people to be more and more active. And so I hope to see you over there. You can get signed up for my weekly newsletter as well, ryanshoward.com. Well, thank you again. This has been the Tamara Scott Show, and I am Ryan Howard in for Tamara Scott. Thank you for joining us and working through some of the technical difficulties with us. So we'll see you in the next program. God bless.